Welcome to Heian Haven. I'm Dawn. Today we're discussing Chapter 12 of the Tale of Genji, Suma. We'll start with our usual summary for shared context. Plagued by scandal, Genji decides to go into exile, choosing Suma, and sets about making arrangements. He makes a series of farewell visits to see his son, Fujitsubo and Hanachiru Sato, and sends letters to many women and the heir apparent. He put his properties into Murasaki's keeping and repositories and granaries into Shonagon's care and left the city sometime after the 20th of the third month. Now 60 miles from the capital at Suma, Genji had a villa constructed to his standards and then began exchanging letters with his friends in the city. Life was full of melancholy, and Genji, realizing how his sorrow affected his handful of retainers, resolved to do better for them. He sketched, painted, played music and games, and composed poetry. The Assistant Governor General of Kyushu passed by on his way back to the capital and sent a message to Genji. His daughter, a Goseki dancer, exchanges poems with Genji. Though he is sorely missed in the capital, word of Genji's correspondence reaches the Empress Mother, and a stern few words stop the flow of letters. Yoshikyo, one of Genji's retainers, remembers and writes to the daughter of the Akashi novice. The novice responds by asking for a meeting, but Yoshikyo does not go, assuming his suit will be turned down. Meanwhile, the Akashi novice has heard of Genji's exile and wishes to arrange presenting his daughter to him, against the wishes of the girl's mother. Sometime after the new year, Tono Chujo defies the court and visits Genji briefly. They talk all night and exchange gifts before Tono Chujo departs back to the city. One of Genji's retainers advises him that a certain date in the third month is auspicious for purification rituals for those in his kind of situation. Arrangements are made, and a ceremony is in the midst of being performed when Genji cries out to the gods that he has done no wrong. The sky darkens, and the sea suddenly surges as a massive storm springs upon the small group, who abandon the ritual and run for cover, fleeing a tsunami. The storm rages on, and Genji has a dream that he has been summoned to the palace. Upon waking, he believes the Dragon King, who desires a beautiful husband for his daughter, has taken an interest in him, and he longs to leave Suma's shore. This chapter covers about a year of the story and is full of scenes of melancholy and despair. There are allusions to Chinese poetry and literature, and references to 4 notable literary exiles: Ariwara no Yukihira, Sugawara no Michizane, Baijui, and Ku Yuan, all of whom have surviving poetry. For the best explanations of these allusions and poetic references, I highly recommend Tyler. If you recall from our introduction, the legend asserts that Murasaki Shikibu wrote the chapters on exile first, the Suma and Akashi chapters. While I doubt that the legend is true, I can just imagine getting a copy or hearing this chapter and wanting to know the rest of the story. Court intrigue, drama, romance, and a violent storm in a chapter sprinkled liberally with poems on a variety of themes and enough heady allusions to make you feel smarter just for catching them. Yes, please. And even more lovely for me, so many clothing references. Let's compare the translations, starting as we so often do with the title. Suematsu and Whaley share exile at Suma. Washburn changes the preposition to give us exile to Suma, while Seidenstecker and Tyler offer Suma. I don't have strong feelings either way, though I ever so slightly lean to Suma. I like the simplicity. We're told that Genji sets off sometime on or after the 20th day of the third month by all of our translators with the exception of Suematsu. Suematsu, as is his habit, uses the Gregorian calendar, saying Genji prepared to set off at the end of March. Japan switched from the lunar calendar to the Gregorian calendar in 1873. Suematsu completed his partial translation of Genji while at Cambridge in the early 1880s, so I understand the use of the Western calendar. It's just unfortunate that it's wrong. I've talked about the calendar before, and to use this as a prime example, the lunar calendar does not align with the Gregorian. The 20th of the third month is going to be closer to the end of April than the end of March. I know that modern Japanese festivals for auspicious days have been shifted to align with the Gregorian calendar, but we cannot conflate that modern practice with the Heian period's use of the lunar calendar. Suematsu's translation is a fraction of the length of the other translations, and it is even more noticeable in these longer chapters. In Chapter 12, we lose a number of encounters as Genji says farewell to those in the capital. In one of these farewell scenes, Genji moves to a mirror to comb his hair or arrange his side locks. Whaley is our only translator that inserts that Genji moves to the mirror for the servants to do his hair. He is at his Nijo villa, so his servants could very well have been the ones doing the arranging, but I find it interesting that Whaley is the only one who says that. Speaking of Whaley, I have what I perceive to be another slip of his perhaps unconscious use of misogyny. He describes Chunagun, an attendant once to Aoi, now to his young son, as a weak woman. The other translators, excluding Suematsu, who doesn't include the scene at all, offer nothing of the sort in their descriptions, and Whaley has another of his insertions early in the chapter, saying Genji had a scheme to hide Murasaki and his retinue to Suma. None of the others discuss Genji's desire to take Murasaki with him in that way. We occasionally have gender differences between translations. In this chapter, when Genji is returning from his farewell visit to his son, he notices Murasaki's pages just beginning to get up. Whaley says they are little boys, but our other translators say girls. I assert that they were little girls in the ladies' service, as little boys wouldn't be proper in the segregated Heian society. Women wait on men, but only women wait on women, for at least intimate or in-person servants of the kuge or court noble class. This is another instance of Whaley getting it wrong. Continuing on with translation differences, we have an instance of a character being named by only one of our translators. Seidenstecker has begun to use the name Gugiri for Genji's son with Aoi. I wonder if the other translators will use the same moniker and when they will start using it. When Genji exchanges palms with the Goseki dancer as she passes by in a boat with her father and family, we're told that he might as well answer her as Sugawara no Michizane had composed a poem for a person of quite low rank, like the Goseki dancer, while he was traveling into exile, passing through Akashi. This person of low or potentially no rank is an ostler, a person who looks after travelers' horses, according to Whaley, an innkeeper, according to Seidenstecker. Tyler uses stable master, and Washburn writes station master. No matter who he was, Sugawara no Michizane wrote a Chinese verse for him. Because he was stripped of his rank and titles, as Genji had been, exchanging poems with a person of no rank was not an issue. Which reminds me, when Genji is at his farewell visit to his son at the former minister's villa, he says that he has been stripped of rank and deprived of office in all of our translations but one. Whaley asserts the opposite, saying, "They have not thought it necessary to deprive me of my various offices and titles." Because Genji spends this chapter vacillating between accepting his situation as being the consequence for his past lives or even his own actions, and proclaiming he has done no wrong, it is important to get this right. It wouldn't make sense for him to don plain clothes if he has maintained his rank. Clothes play a larger role in this chapter. There is quite a lot of poetry in this chapter that contains references to clothing. We have mentions of an obi, a robe, and so many damp and drenched sleeves. I plan to explore these poems in the next Waka Wednesday. But poetry is far from where the clothing is concentrated in this chapter. There is a distinct change in Genji's wardrobe when he loses rank, and Murasaki Shikibu provides us with descriptions of many of Genji's no-rank ensembles. Even more exciting, a lot of these descriptions include color, and I'm especially intrigued by a particular lady's use of dark purple. But let's start at the beginning of the chapter and work our way through. The first thing that stood out to me is not clothing, but a carriage. Let's call it an accessory. When Genji pays his farewell visit to Aoi's son, he arrives heavily disguised in what Suematsu calls an ajiro carriage. This is a basket-work carriage made of rattan or cypress, typically used by women. Tyler specifically lets us know that the silk blinds in the carriage have been kept down or closed. This is all in an effort to remain disguised. When Genji returns to his Nijo villa, he changes into a cloak of plain silk without any crest or badge. That's Whaley. Seidenstecker says, since he was now without rank and office, he changed to informal dress of unfigured silk. So we learned that plain weave silk is appropriate for someone with no rank. Tyler calls the garment a dress cloak, which his glossary tells us is a noshi. We're also reminded that Genji uses a particular fragrance on his clothes. This is a small reminder that scenting one's clothes was de rigueur for those of the aristocracy. The garment would be draped over an open-work wicker stand, and incense would be burned under it. Our one mention of ladies' garments comes during Genji's farewell visit with Hanachiro Sato. Her robe is deep purple. She's not described as a princess or as a woman with rank, so I'm intrigued by the purple that was used. It must be something other than the forbidden color Murasaki, or perhaps only the main hue of Murasaki is limited and other tones or shades are allowed? Or perhaps this is an instance of purple being made of something other than Gromwell root. When Genji goes into exile, he takes only a few things with him: a chest of books, including Baijui poems, a kin, or koto, like Baijui took with him into exile, no imposing furnishings, and no brilliant robes, for he would be living as a mountain rustic. That's Tyler. I think this is a little more akin to Genji cosplaying a mountain rustic than actually being a mountain rustic. Genji goes into exile wearing his traveling costume, a hunting cloak and so on, which he kept very plain. This would be a kirikinu, an upper body garment, and sashinuki, gathered trousers. Murasaki sends Genji night clothes to wear while he was away: a dress cloak and gathered trousers of plain, stiff silk. That's Tyler. This is a noshi worn with sashinuki. Later, Genji is described wearing a white silk twill shift with gathered trousers in the aster shion color and a dress cloak of deep blue. Tyler describes shion as a pale gray violet. So we have Genji in a white garment, light gray violet sashinuki, gathered trousers, and a deep blue noshi, dress cloak. A pretty and subdued ensemble. Blue is common for noshi in the summer. Blue is also an interesting color for clothing in this period. There are 2 shades of blue worn for men's formal dress, and obviously a few blues that are informal. But this seems to only be for men. I keep looking, but I have yet to find evidence of true blue, I'm thinking of Hanada, sky blue in particular, in women's layering combinations. This would only be for the aristocracy though, as indigo is a common dye for the less privileged class. Nuns are known to wear blue grays, and their colors are meant to show the separation from worldly affairs. I just find it odd that such a common color was seemingly limited to men. When Tono Chujo comes to visit, Genji is wearing a purposefully rustic blue-gray hunting cloak and gathered trousers, worn over a sanctioned rose veering toward yellow, in the simple manner of a mountain peasant. That's Tyler. Like I said earlier, he's cosplaying a peasant, a man born a prince who still has access to his resources, even if it's in a roundabout way, will never feel the poverty and everyday struggle of the actual peasants living around him. He's just playing at it. There are a few instances of clothing as gifts in this chapter. We've already talked about Murasaki sending nightclothes to Genji. There is a particular robe that is mentioned. One of the items that Genji took into exile with him was a robe that his father gifted him. This is also a reference to Sugawara no Michizane, as Genji murmurs a bit of one of Sugawara's poems to himself, saying, "Here is the robe he so graciously gave me." The exiled Sugawara no Michizane also had a robe that the emperor had gifted to him. The last robe as gift was given by either Tono Chujo or Genji to the fishermen as a reward for the shellfish they had collected. We learn that Tono Chujo and Genji must be careful in the gifts they exchange with one another. Nothing too ostentatious could be exchanged due to Genji's exile. They exchanged a beautiful flute and a black horse, among other things. Our earliest instance of gifts in this chapter is during Genji's farewells. He sent gifts to his son's nurse and to the ladies at the Villa of Falling Flowers, sending needed provisions as well to the latter. Though the chapter covers a year, the seasonal references are few and mostly revolve around migratory birds in autumn. We're told of chirori, or plovers, geese, and cranes, all of these being fodder for multiple melancholy poems. And it's melancholy that is evoked in our other references, like the plaintive autumn winds in this excerpt from Suematsu. Night after night, he lay listening to that melancholy sound and wondering whether in all the world there could be any place where the sadness of autumn was more overwhelming. Murasaki Shikibu excels in this chapter. The poetry and literary allusions are woven heavily and beautifully through the story. But the one thing that tickles me the most is the storm beginning just after Genji declares himself innocent. It's as though all the gods that he was crying out to call him on his lies all at once. Not that Genji takes it that way, but I found it satisfying. What stood out for you in this chapter? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. Join me next time for Chapter 13, Akashi. Subscribe if you'd like to explore the Heian period of Japan with me through the tale of Genji.